Protesters are still camping out at Harvard and MIT, demanding their universities cut ties to Israel over the country's attacks on Palestinians in Gaza.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Today, protesters at MIT blocked a parking garage entrance before Cambridge police broke up the protest, making several arrests. And at UMass Amherst earlier this week, administrators called police to break up the encampments, arresting around 130 people. GBH News' Tori Bedford has been following the protests closely. She joins me now with the latest. Tori, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You were on site this week. What can you tell me about those dual demonstrations that happened? Was it at MIT?
Yes, so MIT has seen a number of counter-protesters come in. Earlier this week, there were more than 100 people that came out to the steps across the street, and it was for sort of a pro-Israeli counter-protest. They had a police detail. They blocked off all of Mass Ave, and they had fenced. The police had come in earlier in the day and fenced, put in fencing and kind of a curtain around the actual encampment, where they had about 30 to 40 tents. Some of the counter-protesters had come over to the other side. They're hanging the Israeli flag. They were hanging, their own posters. And now there's a poster outside the encampment that says, like, don't take down anyone else's whatever. So there's just this mix of kind of messages out there. And then a second there were counter-protesters. I call them that because they came over to, speak with and engage and yell at with a megaphone the pro-Palestinian protesters in the encampment, but they had come there for this pre-planned Israel Day, so Israelis' Day of Independence. They had come to the Kresge lawn, which is where the encampment is, and they had planned to come there and have a celebration and have some food and some music. And they said that the university had told them to go somewhere else. I reached out to MIT, and they suggested other locations. They didn't cancel the event. They just alerted, the Cambridge police and MIT police and let them know that both events were going to be happening. They were pretty peaceful, I think. What I've seen at MIT is that the encampment itself is very peaceful. There hasn't really been a ton of conflict. Every once in a while, a counter-protester will come into the encampment, and, earlier this week we saw a couple of professors come in. They'll bring a loudspeaker or a megaphone and tell, protesters there, like, shame on you. I saw this independent blogger come in, and he was kind of yelling and trying to confront and stir up things with the encampment. But the encampment itself, the protesters are very peaceful. I think, they really just want to stay on message. They're asking the university to cut ties with the Israeli Defense Ministry. There's some financial data that was published by this Scientists Against Genocide group at MIT, and it shows that since 2015, the university has received about $11 million in funding from the Israeli Defense Ministry. So they do a lot of, engineering, and they get a lot of military funding in general, and they're working on a lot of these innovations for military stuff, drones and rockets and the design of these things, right? And
I want to help people understand just the counter-protesters.
Yeah.
What were they saying while they were there?
So a lot of them said, shame on you. Some of them have said that, they support Israel. They are really focused on the message of hostages who are being held by Hamas and bringing, those Americans and Israeli, getting them out of the people who were kidnapped. They're really focused on the message of the hostages. They've come in and, I think, been expecting sometimes a fight. There was this one counter-protester in particular, Shabbos Kestenbaum, who came in, and he was saying, he got in sort of a conflict with the Cambridge chief of police. He was saying, I don't need you to escort me. Why isn't it safe for me to come in as a man, a Jewish man wearing a kippah and coming in and, waving an American flag? So the chief of police escorts him in. He walks around. Everyone kind of ignores him. He yells, shame on you to everyone. He walks back out. And there were a number of Jewish pro-Palestine protesters who were there, some of whom were wearing kippahs. So I was talking to them, and I was like, hey, do you feel safe here? And what was really interesting to me was that one of them told me that he initially didn't know if he would feel safe or if he would make others feel safe by wearing a kippah. So he kind of went to, his girlfriend goes to MIT, he kind of wanted to see what that experience was like, and he felt entirely safe. And then another Jewish pro-Palestine protester told me that he feels like a lot of Jewish people who are against Israel they feel like a minority in this movement. So, the counter-protesters who are pro-Israel were saying, we're here to tell Jewish students at MIT you are not alone. Mm-hmm. And he was saying, well, I'm saying the same thing. I want Jewish students who are against Israel's military actions to know that they are not alone and that we are also a part of and represented in this movement. So right now, there were a number of suspensions that were issued at MIT yesterday, and then, as you mentioned, today a number of arrests have occurred. We saw the footage of police scuffling. There was a lot of chaos over there today. At Harvard, there's been a lot of talk about those suspensions coming down. The university, as long as the protest is peaceful, they really don't have as much grounds to break it up unless these students are suspended, in which case they're on campus property, they're trespassing, which is then a misdemeanor. And so I was thinking this week that, we would start to see more arrests after the suspensions had gone through.
What do you make about the students' resolve, just given that they were out there again today, a day after MIT started issuing suspensions?
A number of students who were, Monday at 2:30 was the deadline to clear out the encampment or face suspension or expulsion or some kind of other, consequence. And a lot of them stayed. There were 5 who completely stayed the whole time, and then people rushed back in, rebuilt the encampment. I spoke to students who said that this, calling on the university to divest, calling on the university to really analyze where their endowment is going, where their students' tuition is going, like where they're putting their money towards, that is worth more to them than a degree. And I'm talking about, I spoke to one undergrad who told me that, she's supposed to be graduating in like a few weeks, right? Like this is really the end of her time at MIT. Another 7th year PhD student who's supposed to be graduating in August. And he is an international student who, he could lose his visa. And this is so important to them, this message, and not just the message, but this protest, this action calling on the university to divest, that they're saying this is worth absolutely everything to us. This is worth more than getting a degree. We're willing to sacrifice this if it means that we can actually hold the university to account, because we've done a number of protests about this since October 7th, and we haven't really felt that they've been feeling the heat from this, that they've been really feeling the pressure. But this is the one thing that's really making the university uncomfortable in this way and forcing them to act. And so it's working in their eyes.
I want to ask you one last thing in light of that point. What do you make of President Biden warning about withholding certain weapons if the Israeli military launches an offensive in the city of Rafah? Do you read that as a sign that student protests are reaching a higher level, that they're making some impact in the international conversation?
I think so. I think that he's definitely paying attention. He's definitely looking at, across the country, we've seen this widespread movement. And if we look at this historically, movements like this have made a real difference. I've also seen videos of children, Palestinian children in Gaza, thanking these students at these universities. And so, sometimes you'll go to the university and talk to students and they'll say, well, we really need to focus eyes on Gaza. This is what's important. Don't talk to us about what we're dealing with on the ground. But ultimately, what they're doing is all channeling back towards where Israel would be without U.S. support. And Israel would be extremely, much, much weaker without this extreme support from the West and from the U.S. and all of the Western nations that have supported Israel and pumped military help into Israel and given them weapons and financial support and recruitment and training and all of these other things that we do. And so I think President Biden, it shows that he is definitely paying attention. It shows that these protests are having an impact.
And Tori Bedford, you'll keep paying attention on behalf of GBH. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saraya.